The entire industry froze at exactly 12:41 a.m. because a private audio file carrying the name Teyana Taylor detonated across Hollywood group chats like a silent bomb, and nobody was ready for what was inside. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't a blog leak. This was a voice. A trembling, furious, unfiltered voice, and the woman behind it. Jaguar Wright. The same insider, who has been quietly warning people for years, just cracked the door open wider than anyone ever thought she would. Because in a now viral recording, Jaguar doesn't just hint at secret deals, fake friendships, or staged success stories. She names rooms. She names power brokers. She names the moments careers were allegedly rewritten behind locked doors, while the artists were kept smiling for cameras they didn't control. And buried deep inside that recording, Teyana's name drops like a thunderclap. Sources say Teyana heard the audio while sitting with people she once trusted, and the temperature in that room allegedly shifted instantly. One insider says her phone lit up. Another claims she stood up without saying a word. And a third source swears she sent a single message to someone at the very top of the food chain. A message so explosive that an emergency meeting was called within minutes. But here's what no one is prepared for. Jaguar didn't release everything. She teased a second file. A longer one. A darker one. And according to someone who has already heard it, the first recording was only meant to soften the blow. Because the next clip doesn't expose the system. It exposes who knew. And if that file really drops tonight, Teyana's silence is about to turn into the loudest eruption Hollywood has ever witnessed. The night the leak spread through private industry chats faster than any press release ever could have planned, because the name Teyana Taylor was suddenly attached to a file nobody wanted to open, but everyone already had downloaded, and inside that audio you could hear hesitation crack into rage as whispers turned into accusations, and every pause sounded like someone choosing whether to survive the fallout or burn everything down around them, while panic moved from phone to phone and assistants started deleting calendars and cancelling meetings like the future itself had just been cancelled by one voice: tonight alone forever. Inside the recording, a familiar voice finally stepped forward, and when listeners realized it belonged to Jaguar Wright, the room allegedly froze. Because this was not an interview or performance, but a confession stitched together from studio hallways, parking garages, and late-night car rides where promises were traded for silence and loyalty was demanded without paperwork. She claimed entire careers were redirected with one phone call, and she described watching people disappear socially first and professionally later, until nobody remembered their names anymore except the ones who buried them and slept peacefully afterward, while history was rewritten quietly forever again. By the time the clip reached Teyana, insiders say the damage was already irreversible, because someone inside her inner circle allegedly played the audio twice, once to confirm it was real and again to make sure nobody could deny what was being implied about who protected certain executives. When artists quietly complained about intimidation, manipulation, and forced silence, sources claim she didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just stared at the phone and whispered a name nobody else dared say out loud. Because the walls had ears, and those ears allegedly reported everything back to people who could erase futures. Minutes later, a screenshot began circulating showing a blurred contact name and 6 words typed in a message bubble nobody could confirm, but everyone believed belonged to Teyana, because the tone was unmistakable, calm, lethal, and final. Insiders swear the recipient panicked and immediately called a crisis consultant who advised them to stop answering calls and wipe cloud backups before sunrise. But it was too late, because a second leak surfaced moments later, this time a studio security report listing names, dates, rooms, and unexplained badge scans that suddenly placed the same people in the same building that Jaguar described. The chaos didn't stay private for long, because social media inhaled the scandal like oxygen, and within minutes hashtags exploded accusing unnamed producers of building secret blacklists and silent partnerships. Fans pulled old interviews and froze awkward smiles into screenshots, while conspiracy threads connected backstage photos to blurred faces and suspicious timelines. One viral clip showed Teyana laughing beside someone now being accused of knowing far more than they ever admitted publicly. And suddenly the laugh looked rehearsed and painful, like survival training disguised as success, and every retweet felt like another brick in a wall closing in around her. Behind-the-scenes sources describe a frantic scramble as lawyers argued over what could still be contained and what was already lost, because Jaguar had allegedly sent backup files to multiple locations, including a journalist who promised not to publish unless something happened to her safety. And when word reached Teyana that detail, insiders claim her voice finally cracked during a closed-door call, where she demanded to know why her name appeared in a story she never agreed to star in, and the silence on the other end reportedly lasted so long she thought the line had dropped completely. Then a new audio snippet surfaced, only 17 seconds long, but devastating enough to change everything, because a male voice clearly says her name and laughs before promising to fix the situation quietly, and the laugh sounded exactly like the laugh fans had heard in old red carpet interviews where deals were celebrated and friendships were praised. Now the clip was slowed down and enhanced by amateur audio engineers online, who insisted the speaker matched a powerful industry insider everyone recognizes but nobody dares identify, because careers vanish when you name them publicly, and suddenly fear felt louder than proof. As the fire spread, a former collaborator of Teyana quietly unfollowed her on every platform, triggering instant theories about loyalty fractures and hidden alliances, while another celebrity posted a vague quote about truth rising and storms passing that fans immediately treated like confirmation something monstrous was coming. Jaguar then appeared briefly on a live stream looking exhausted but steady, and warned viewers that what they heard was only the doorway and the hallway ahead was far darker than anyone imagined. She hinted at contracts rewritten overnight and footage hidden inside private archives protected by lawyers and fear and money alone. Back in Teyana's camp, panic hardened into strategy as advisors urged her to release a statement denying everything, while others insisted silence was the only weapon left, because the moment she spoke, she would validate Jaguar claims and invite subpoenas from people who rarely lose court battles. Insiders say she typed 3 different drafts and deleted all of them before sending nothing at all, and instead she allegedly forwarded the security report to someone she trusted once, but not anymore. Because trust had become the most dangerous currency in the room that night, and nobody wanted to hold it twice. Meanwhile, fans organized digital watch parties to monitor every Jaguar appearance, while anonymous accounts claimed they possessed screenshots proving a private dinner took place between executives and artists on the same night Jaguar referenced in her recording, and one image showed Teyana entering a back elevator, while another angle allegedly captured the same executive moments later, with a folder labeled development. Insiders swear that folder was code for damage control, and suddenly every blurry pixel looked intentional, like someone wanted history preserved, just enough to hurt, but never enough to prosecute, and the public started demanding names, faces, consequences immediately. By dawn, a private meeting was allegedly scheduled between representatives for multiple artists who felt burned by the same circle Jaguar described, and Teyana was invited not as a guest, but as leverage. Insiders claim someone wanted her presence to pressure another figure into cooperation, but nobody warned her the meeting location had changed last minute to avoid reporters, and when she arrived the building lobby was empty except for a security guard who didn't recognize her name on the list, and that omission sent a chill through everyone waiting upstairs, because it meant something had shifted again silently already. Upstairs, a closed door hid the truth that could end careers and reshape everything Jaguar warned about, and as Teyana stepped forward, her phone vibrated with one final notification from an unknown sender containing a single audio file labeled proof. Inside the message read, "Play this before you speak to anyone else, because the voice you are about to hear does not belong to a stranger, it belongs to the person sitting across from you right now." And the moment she lifted her eyes toward the table, the recording began to play, and every breath in the room stopped completely. The audio file opened with static, and then a familiar breath, And when Teyana Taylor heard the voice inside that room shift from casual confidence to nervous control, insiders say her entire posture changed, because the person sitting across from her was suddenly no longer an ally, but a liability, and the words playing through her phone were not old, not recycled, not pulled from a forgotten archive, but recorded less than 2 weeks earlier inside a private office everyone in that room had sworn was off limits to outsiders. The voice on the recording calmly discussed how to redirect narrative energy, how to slow down certain voices before they grow legs, and how one artist in particular needed to be handled carefully, because she still believes people play fair. And when the speaker chuckled and said Teyana's name out loud, nobody at that table could pretend confusion anymore, because the room itself had just become evidence. One insider later whispered that she didn't confront him immediately, because she wanted him to finish listening to himself first. Because watching someone recognize their own voice on a leak is more devastating than any accusation, and when the clip ended the silence felt surgical, controlled, and terrifying. Like every person present knew they were standing inside a moment that would eventually be subpoenaed. Across the city, another file surfaced at almost the same time, and this one was being quietly seeded through private fan accounts and industry burner pages, and the source attached a single sentence above it that read, "This is why she stayed quiet for years." And when listeners pressed play, they recognized the unmistakable voice of Jaguar Wright breaking down mid-sentence while describing how artists were pressured into pretending certain executives were mentors when they were actually gatekeepers who controlled access to budgets, studio time, collaborations, and press coverage behind closed doors. She claimed contracts were rewritten without artists present, clauses were buried inside amended documents, and retaliation didn't look like threats, but like cancelled meetings, lost playlist placements, silent radio drops, and sudden distance from people who once swore loyalty in public and disappeared in private. And then she said something that instantly detonated online. She said Teyana was never meant to survive that system the way she did. Not because she wasn't talented, but because she asked too many questions. That single line ignited a digital firestorm as fans began reposting old clips where Teyana jokingly hinted at being difficult in meetings, and suddenly the jokes felt coded and painful and prophetic. And within minutes viral threads started mapping timelines of delayed releases, scrapped collaborations, and mysterious creative shifts that now looked less like artistic evolution and more like quiet compromise. Inside the meeting room where the leaked audio had just exposed the man across the table, his phone started vibrating repeatedly and someone noticed his hands shaking as he typed, because while the world outside was dissecting Jaguar's words, another narrative was collapsing right in front of him, and he could no longer control which version of the story would win. An assistant rushed in and whispered that journalists were already requesting comment, and that 2 former artists had contacted legal counsel after hearing the recordings, and when Teyana finally spoke, her voice was reportedly calm enough to scare everyone. She asked one question. "Who else has this?" No one answered immediately. Because everyone in that room already knew the truth was no longer centralized. It was decentralized, duplicated, encrypted, and already moving faster than any crisis team could intercept. Within an hour, anonymous accounts posted blurred screenshots of what appeared to be internal scheduling calendars labeled talent repositioning, with names redacted, but initials matching multiple recognizable figures, and fans immediately began guessing identities in comment sections that grew faster than moderators could delete them. Another burner account claimed there was a private off-site retreat where executives met quarterly to decide which artists would be prioritized, and which would be quietly starved of resources, and while nobody could verify the post, Jaguar went live again and simply said, "They know exactly what I'm talking about," before ending the stream abruptly. Back at Teyana's camp, panic and strategy collided as advisors argued over whether confronting the executive publicly would protect her or destroy her. Because while sympathy was rising rapidly online, powerful people were also watching carefully to see how much she would dare to expose, and insiders say the unspoken threat wasn't lawsuits, but isolation. Because isolation is how careers disappear without headlines. Meanwhile, a new audio clip emerged from a completely different source, and this one cut even deeper. Because it featured two recognizable industry voices joking about how artists forget who paid for the launch, and how loyalty was cheaper than lawsuits, and when one of the voices mentioned Teyana again, the tone shifted from playful to calculating, as if her independence had become a financial inconvenience rather than a personal choice. Social media erupted instantly. Reaction videos flooded timelines. Fans filmed themselves shaking, crying, shouting at their screens. Hashtags demanding transparency trended globally. And then, unexpectedly, a well-known celebrity, who had previously collaborated with Teyana, posted a single-sentence story that read, "I believe her, and nothing else." That post alone triggered an avalanche of speculation, because people noticed the celebrity had unfollowed several powerful executives moments earlier, and within minutes their own comment section was flooded with demands to speak up, to confirm names, to expose everything. But instead of elaborating, the post disappeared. Deleted. Gone. Which somehow made it louder than if it had stayed. Behind the scenes, Teyana received a private message from a former label employee who claimed to have kept copies of internal emails, because they were afraid of what would happen if they didn't, and attached to the message was a spreadsheet labeled Priority Adjustments, with dates that aligned exactly with multiple stalled projects from artists Jaguar had mentioned publicly. The sender warned her not to forward it, and said there were watermarks hidden inside the document that could trace the leak back to them. And yet, somehow, 30 minutes later, screenshots of the same spreadsheet appeared online anyway. Which meant someone else had already leaked it. Or someone inside her own circle had made a decision without asking her. Trust fractured instantly. Group chats went silent. People who had been sitting next to her hours earlier stopped answering texts. And while the internet celebrated what looked like a long overdue reckoning, Teyana was realizing in real time that exposure doesn't come with protection. It only comes with attention. The most dangerous moment arrived quietly, when an unknown number finally called her phone, and she almost ignored it until the voicemail preview displayed a single sentence. "This is about your mother." The message didn't contain threats. It didn't contain insults. It simply asked her to stop listening to Jaguar. And that subtle shift terrified her more than any aggressive warning could. Because now the battlefield had moved away from contracts and reputations, and into personal territory no one had permission to touch. She forwarded the voicemail to her legal team immediately, but insiders say she didn't tell anyone else in the room, because once family becomes leverage, silence stops being strategic and starts becoming survival. That same night, Jaguar posted a cryptic update stating that she had handed a full archive of recordings and documents to a third party, and that if anything happened to her or anyone connected to her, everything would be released automatically. And buried inside her caption was one line no one could ignore. Teyana knows exactly which file matters most. Less than 10 minutes later, Teyana's phone lit up with a new notification from the same unknown sender who had contacted her earlier. This time, there was no spreadsheet. No warning. No explanation. Only a single video file titled with today's date. And when the thumbnail loaded on her screen, she immediately recognized the room. The same private office. The same table. The same man. But this time, the camera angle was different. And the conversation had clearly started long before she ever walked into that meeting. The moment the video finished buffering, Teyana Taylor felt the air disappear from the room, because the footage didn't just confirm what she already suspected, it expanded it into something far more dangerous than leaked audio or whispered accusations ever could. The camera was hidden. Not shaky. Not accidental. Fixed. Mounted. Perfectly angled at the table where the same executive had been sitting hours earlier pretending confusion. And this time, he wasn't alone. The footage showed two other figures entering the frame slowly, casually, like this meeting had happened 100 times before. Coffee was poured. Phones were placed face down. A folder was slid across the table. And then the conversation started. At first it sounded harmless. Quarterly planning. Brand alignment. Scheduling conflicts. But then one of the voices leaned closer to the mic and said something that made Teyana physically step back from the screen. She doesn't understand how much protection she's been getting. Another voice laughed quietly. And then came the line that cracked everything open. If she ever realizes how close she came to being shut down completely, she'll never trust any of us again. They were talking about her. Not vaguely. Not in theory. In detail. They referenced specific interviews she had requested and been told were unavailable. They referenced a collaboration she believed fell through because of creative differences. They referenced a campaign that mysteriously pivoted to another artist days before contracts were finalized. And each time, the same phrase was repeated. We redirected it. Not cancelled. Not delayed. Redirected. As if her career were traffic. As if her momentum was something they could reroute around more profitable faces. One of the men in the video leaned back and said something that sounded almost bored. She's smart, but she still thinks this is about music. Another replied instantly. It's never about music. Inside the file, timestamps in the corner revealed something even more devastating. This meeting happened months before Jaguar ever went public with anything. Which meant none of this was reaction. It was preparation. And that realization hit harder than any rumor ever could. Because it meant her name had already been circulating quietly inside rooms she would never be invited into. Not as a star, but as a variable. When the clip reached the final minutes, the conversation turned colder. Strategic. One voice suggested that keeping her close publicly was safer than pushing her away privately. Another voice agreed and said visibility was leverage. The third voice asked a single question. What happens if she starts asking the wrong people the right questions? The room went silent. And then the answer arrived. We isolate her. No anger. No hesitation. No drama. Just policy. Just procedure. Just execution. At that moment, a new message popped up on her phone. Different number. Different account. Same tone. You weren't supposed to see that one yet. Her heart dropped. Because it meant someone on the other side of this leak was still pacing what she discovered. Still controlling the order. Still deciding what version of reality she was allowed to digest at a time. Across social media, the fallout was escalating faster than anyone predicted. Clips from Jaguar's earlier live stream were being remixed into montage videos layered over screenshots of stalled projects, scrapped releases, and interviews where Teyana had smiled through questions that suddenly sounded loaded. But the real earthquake came seconds later. Because Jaguar Wright broke her silence again. No live stream. No countdown. No warning. Just a raw post that said, they didn't just do it to her. And beneath that line, a blurred image. 3 silhouettes. 1 table. 1 folder. The exact same room. Fans froze the frame instantly. The shape of the lighting. The pattern on the carpet. The angle of the window. It matched. Perfectly. The internet finally understood that Jaguar and Teyana were now holding different pieces of the same map. And the map didn't lead to gossip. It led to structure. It led to systems. It led to patterns. Inside Teyana's circle, panic was replaced by something far more dangerous. Resolve. She didn't forward the video immediately. She didn't send it to her lawyers. She didn't even tell her team what she had seen. Instead, she did something no one expected. She opened an encrypted messaging app she hadn't used in years. A contact name appeared at the top. A person she stopped trusting after a deal collapsed quietly. A person who once warned her, "They'll never attack you directly. They'll make everyone else forget to support you." Her message was short. "I finally have proof." The reply came faster than she expected. "So do I." And attached beneath it was a folder. Not a single file. A folder. Dozens of timestamps. Multiple document formats. And one label. Pattern. She opened the first file. It was an internal calendar. She opened the second. An email chain referencing her brand image in financial terms. She opened the third.
Right,
a recorded call where a publicist discussed how to soften an artist's exit narrative before the artist even knew they were being phased out. Her name appeared 3 times. Not in the subject line. Not in the greeting. In the strategy notes. Because while fans online were fighting over who to believe, someone somewhere had been quietly building a manual on how to manage her visibility without ever letting her control it. Then the folder jumped to a final file. Highlighted. Flagged. Locked behind a passcode. And underneath the file name was a note. "This is the one they are scared of." She hesitated. Because if she opened it, she knew she could never unhear it. She could never unknow it. She could never go back to pretending distance was accidental. She typed the passcode. The file opened. The audio began. This time the voice belonged to a woman. Calm. Professional. Recognizable to anyone who follows the industry closely. And the first sentence out of her mouth shattered the illusion that this was only about stalled releases and brand conflicts. If she ever decides to talk publicly, we'll need to remind her what she stands to lose. Another voice asked, "Like what?" The reply was instant. "Not contracts. Relationships." A pause. Then, "Family keeps people cooperative." The room around Teyana collapsed inward. Because the voicemail she had received earlier suddenly made terrifying sense. And the leak was no longer just about power. It was about proximity. Pressure. Personal boundaries that had already been crossed without her knowledge. Her phone vibrated again. A new message from the same unknown sender, who had guided her through the previous leaks. One sentence. "If you think this is the worst clip, you're still behind." And then came the final attachment. A video file. Different room. Different camera. Same people. But this time, the date stamp in the corner showed something impossible. The meeting happened tomorrow. Not metaphorically. Literally. A future timestamp. A scheduled recording. A preset camera. A pre-arranged conversation. Already planned. Already waiting. Already about to happen. And beneath the file, a caption appeared on her screen. "They don't know you know." Right now, before the next file leaks, before another voice memo hits the internet, before another carefully edited clip rewrites the truth, this is the moment that decides whether what just exploded around Teyana Taylor becomes another buried Hollywood nightmare, or the story that finally refuses to disappear. Because what you just heard isn't celebrity gossip. It's a warning. It's a blueprint. It's a glimpse behind doors that were never meant to open, and the reason people like Jaguar Wright were treated like problems instead of witnesses. If you walk away now, this story doesn't stop. It just gets controlled. And that is exactly how these secrets survive. So I need you to do something right now, not later, not after the next video, not after the next headline tries to soften what you just heard. Hit like if you believe silence protects the wrong people. Subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the clips they don't want trending. And drop your comment below telling us one thing. Do you think this leak was meant to save her? Or was it meant to scare her into disappearing quietly? Because the next file is already sitting on someone's phone. The next voice is already recorded. The next meeting is already scheduled. And if you're not locked in when it drops, you won't hear it when it actually matters. This channel isn't here to polish stories. It's here to catch the truth before it gets erased.